And welcome and thank you for joining our discussion today, presented on the CCNG member webcast channel. It's a channel that has a community of subscribers of over 7,000 contact center and customer care professionals. I'm David Hadibus, President and CEO of CCNG, and I'm here today to facilitate our discussion with you, our live audience, and our member, Noel Roberts. He's the Chief Technology Officer and VP of Marketing over at ARIA Solutions. And today we're discussing how organizations are handling merging or even shrinking customer support channels. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why to adopt some channels into the mix. For those of you who are new to CCNG, we are a professional peer network for contact center and customer care management. Our members discuss topics focused on process improvements, staffing challenges, the impact of technology, and a whole lot more. These issues are all relating to the ever-changing challenges of managing contact center and customer care. Noel today is going to lead a discussion around really the trends and understandings of what your peers are doing as it relates to support omnichannel. So during our webinar, we will have a poll question. We really encourage your participation. It's a question around your priority channel as you look into the future, into the next year. What do you think you'll adopt next? So we appreciate your participation. We'll get Noel's take on that on the back end. And throughout the webinar today, please use the question box on your screen to submit your questions for Noel, as we'll discuss as many of these that we can as time permits, given our 45, 55 minutes that we'll be discussing this today. So that's kind of our setup. Welcome back, Noel. We appreciate you taking time with us today, and let me turn it over to you to get things going.
All right. Well, thank you very much, David. And just before I get started, I just want to say that I'm going to divide the presentation up into about 4 different parts. So the first is going to be looking at why consider channels now, and what's driving that look today, and what channels are out there. Let's have a look at the various set of channels that are out there, and then look at some guidelines about how to determine what the right channel or channels might be for you. And then we'll have a closer look at 4 significant channels that ARIA has been seeing and that Gartner says will be playing a pretty big role in the future. So first off, why look at these channels now? So there's an explosion really that's happening right now with channels, driven in large part by new technology that's making these channels possible through artificial intelligence, apps, new devices. And so we're really moving beyond just that world of 4 standard channels that we've been used to of voice and basic IVR, email, and some web chat, and moving towards 25 or more channels that are available to customers. And so AI is playing a really big role in that. It's enabling complex or those intelligent transactions, making those possible, and it's also making them possible across multiple channels. So this is what I call that sort of breadth and depth that bots provide, and the depth really is that additional complexity or adding those additional transactions that weren't really that possible before AI came along, and then taking that depth and being able to provide it across a multitude of channels. So like chat channels, messaging apps, and that sort of thing. So, and those are communication channels. So that's really where AI fits. And so what this leads to is, with conversational IVR, chatbots, and so on, is it's driving a lot of growth. And according to Gartner, what we're seeing is that the needle is basically moving from 50% self-service, so just about half or a little over half, to nearly 2/3 of interaction being handled via self-service and fully self-served. And then all the way up to 85% if you count the partially self-served interactions as well. So it really means that a lot of interactions are going to be handled and involve artificial intelligence-based self-service. So yeah, the other thing that AI is powering is process automation. Excuse me. And with process automation, companies are able to essentially, without human involvement, send messages and things through alerts, for example, like outbound SMS. And so that's providing enablement through automation. And also agents are going to benefit by leveraging self-service and the automation capabilities, even when they're doing assisted service. So, for example, as they send a caller to an AI-based IVR, for example, for payment or for password reset while they're on the phone with that caller, that's an element that that agents will be able to take advantage of. Okay. Yeah, other thing that's also happening is new apps are being introduced as well as new devices. So new applications, particularly messaging apps such as WhatsApp and Apple Business Chat and Skype, are enabling these new channels, some of these new channels, as well as devices like Amazon Echo and Google Home are also adding to the increase in channels that are available. And so what that means is that we're really dealing with 12 emerging channels in addition to the 4 that we talked about at the beginning. So 12 plus 4, around 16, or say about 13 to 16 channels that an organization is going to have to deal with. And that's not all agent channels. Some of those are obviously self-serve, but it does show an increase in the number of channels that agents will need to be handling as well. So what's this driving? Well, it's driving the fact that with all these channels, we're having to look at customer processes. It's forcing, essentially, us to deal with change and to re-engineer our processes in order to accommodate these new channels in order to improve the customer experience. And with all of these channels and all this technology, it's really making things difficult, for businesses to make those changes and improve customer experience, for IT to build the solutions, and also for agents. It's complicating their lives as well. So it's the sheer number of emerging channels that's forcing us to make our processes and updating our journeys is really what's at stake here. So with that, you can see that it's no wonder that we're still seeing a decline in the CX quality. And so Forrester for 2018 is predicting that there's still a pretty significant decline. And Forrester and Gartner as well have, since about 2015, shown that there's been declines in customer experience. And in large part, with this complexity, it's certainly not helping organizations with that challenge. So next, what I want to do is to start looking at some of the channels specifically. So I've broken this down into looking at channels from that customer perspective, but also looking at channels from an organizational perspective. So I'm hoping this can be a tool that you can use in order to help figure out what channels you might want to consider or look at adopting from what customers might be using, as well as what within your organization you might want to use. So from the customer perspective, this slide is showing basically the 21 or so channels I have listed here that are the explosion, really, of channels available to customers. And it's really more than 21 because some of them are combined. Like I talked about messaging apps as one of them, but that includes WhatsApp and Skype and Apple Business Chat, for example. So there's a multitude of messaging apps out there. And also things like virtual personal assistants like Alexa and Google Home. So if you count all of that, there's definitely more than 21. It's probably 25 to 30 or even more channels that really customers are going to be able to access. So some of the ones that are shrinking, so voice calls are shrinking, and although they're shrinking as a percentage of interaction. So call volume is being consumed by other channels, and so some of the call volume is going down, but also because of all these other channels happening, it's increasing the overall number of interactions that are happening out there, And so it's really that percentage drop that's significant. And what Gartner says is that they feel it's going to drop from about 41% to 12% over the next 4 years. So a pretty significant drop, again, as a percentage. Standard IVR is another one that's shrinking as it's being replaced by bots, and conversational chat bots in general is going to eat away at that. And email is shrinking in part because it's hard to provide good customer service with email, and it also seems to be a fairly costly channel for companies to provide service on. So yeah, and then on the emerging side, I think what's really emerging and going to provide a lot of growth is around the chatbots, IVR, conversational IVR, and virtual assistants together. Gartner feels is going to be about 30% of all the self-service activity over the next 4 years, just in those three channels alone. So this is a look from the customer perspective. So now inside the organization, if we look at it from a self-service perspective and what organizations might want to provide for self-service channels, and I've highlighted the ones that really kind of fit that bill. And these channels really talk to where the self-service capability is. So when we talk about visual IVR or a virtual assistant, it's that the ability to self-serve is in that technology as a channel. But they can be applied to some of these other channels, obviously. So if you've got a chatbot, you can apply it to SMS or chat or messaging apps, for example. So just kind of wanted to highlight what those areas are where the intelligence lies for self-service. So this is really, again, to kind of help people understand within their organizations what channels you might want to consider for these different groupings that I've listed. So the next one is around automation. So really, although there's only 3 highlighted, again, it follows the same model as self-service. So where self-service was really the customer contacting and looking to self-serve or executing that self-service option, this is more around the organization and what the organization can do to automate certain types of communication outside of the agent having to do it. So some of these are definitely on the alert side, so outbound alerts, which can use channels like SMS or even email. IoT devices, so any of the technology out there that's IoT-based, they can typically offer alerts and updates. And even mobile apps on your phone can provide an update either through the app or even through the phone itself. So these are essentially technologies that you can cause some communication to happen when you're doing process automation. And lastly, I want to look at the agents themselves and assisted service. So with this set of channels, I've highlighted the ones that agents typically would use. And this, I've varied it a little bit from the customer-facing view because although a customer might look at different channels like WhatsApp and Skype and so on, even SMS, as different channels, on the organization side, an agent using the right technology, those channels can consolidate into one interface for the agent. So I've kind of grouped chat basically here from an agent perspective as including web chat and SMS and messaging apps for that reason. So it's a little bit different in that box. And then the purple boxes at the bottom are channels that are only really available on the organization side, on the corporate side. So delivering work items. So work items is a push model where you can route work to back office agents or even your front office agents. You can consider as a type of channel. And I've listed microservices also as a, call it, kind of channel. And this is because agents don't actually, say, use the IVR necessarily or the chatbot in this scenario. It's that they're actually handing off the customer to a chatbot, and or an IVR, for example. So what I'm really getting at with the microservices piece is maybe picture a call that the agent is handling, and now they want to hand that call off for, say, a payment or a password reset or something like that. Well, they might have a button on their CRM or their desktop that they click to send off to that task of payment, for example. And then the customer will be handed off to maybe a chatbot or an IVR in order to process that payment. And it's not really about the channel, it's about that action that the agent can take. So there's technology out there that's really focused on these microservices, these sort of subtask components. And lastly, we have VEA, or Virtual Enterprise Assistants. And these are essentially bots that reside within the organization that can help agents along. And this is a pretty big deal, and I think there's going to be a lot of movement here as well, where this AI-enabled bot helping the agent out is going to be particularly important with things getting more complicated for agents. So yeah, so that's kind of the summary of really all the different types of interactions or channels, that are available out there, and it's a pretty huge list. And so again, hoping that these slides can act as a bit of a tool to help provide some guidance for you when you're looking at it. I did base these on what Gartner has provided, but I kind of reorganized it a bit more based on our experience and tried to categorize it and match it across the organization and the customer to sort of hopefully allow you to make those connections. So I think it's time for the poll. So I think, David, do you want to take it away on the poll side?
Yep, I got it. Hey, before we let you go off that last slide, I'll just nav back to it here real quick. One more time, VEA, another acronym. Thanks so much. Virtual
Enterprise Assistant.
Okay.
So
there you go.
There's three in that family. There's virtual personal assistants like, Siri and Google Assistant, and then there's virtual customer assistants that are typically bots that you can use yourself from your organization's point of view, and then virtual enterprise assistants. So all three are kind of a lumped set of technology, but with different applications.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying. Quickly, our poll question today around channels, no surprise. If you have a priority channel that you're looking at within the next year, give us your answer here. Again, there's 4 options to choose from, or give us your best guess or perspective or what you think your clients are looking at. However you want to look at it, just participate. We do appreciate your participation in the poll. We'll leave it up for a few minutes. Noel, I'll let you continue on.
All right, thanks, David. Okay, so we talked about channels and a lot of activity there. And so really with all of these channels, how do we pick which channels that you want to adopt? And one of the major things we mentioned earlier on, talked about at the beginning, is that the sheer volume of channels is really forcing companies to look at their customer-centric processes. And so really you have to start with those processes first, and then that will drive out the channels that you're going to need to look at. So for the next couple of slides, I just want to talk about how you might go about choosing your processes. And these are some pretty high level guidelines. But first off, you're going to want to pick a set of processes that are customer centric. We want to do that as a clear focus because we're dealing with channels and that communications aspect with customers. We also want to capture them from end to end. So we prefer to not have partial processes, but we really want to capture those end-to-end transactions. So those things about getting things done, like onboarding a new customer or purchasing a product, something like that. That's a full transaction, and look at that whole piece because, of course, the experience that you're going to provide as an organization entails all of that. Now, there can be challenges internally. If you've got more of a strategic initiative, you might have a project in place that allows you to look at that across different divisions. But even if you don't, you can look at your own area and particularly look at processes that you're more dominant in terms of involving the customer, and you'll still make some good headway on that, even if you can't involve all your different teams together in a full end-to-end transaction. So after that, you're going to want to identify the processes that customers think are broken. So it could be customer satisfaction scores, or just talking to your agents, or looking at complaints. You want to select the ones that consume a lot of agent time. That'll provide a lot of benefit, obviously, as well. It's a good place to start. And then pick the top 3 to 5 of those processes that have the biggest CX impact. And then in order to continue from there, and you've selected those processes, then what do you do with them at this point, and how do you go about modifying them? So first off is you want to group processes together as a kind of specialist skill. So like a loan skill, or billing, or transportation. And this is so that you can then apply it as a kind of skill that you can give to an agent for manual assisted service, or you could create a specialized bot around. And then you kind of captured a chunk of functionality that you can work on that makes sense. You're also going to want to look at, for the self-service and automated processes, you're also going to want to look at the equivalent manual processes. And really what I'm getting at there is that self-service and automated processes, they can fail, and you need to make sure that you can have a manual backup to that, or also for those partially self-served processes or transactions that need to be handed off to an agent. You're going to need to capture those scenarios as well. Then you're going to want to break them down into specific tasks, and then you're going to want to trace or draw out the journeys that you want with those tasks that complete the transaction. And so that, by doing that, allows you, as you're modifying those tasks, allows you to, with consideration of the channels we looked at earlier, taking those channels and applying them to your tasks and mapping out the journeys, you can start to look at what channels really make sense for which of those specific tasks that you're working on. So yeah, so that kind of talked about the process side of things, and really starting with process, but still it might be a good place for some people to still look at some channels specifically. You might not know where to start, or you might want to look at some of these channels as ones that are worth leveraging. So we'll look at 4, and these are ones that we've seen kind of emerging, and that Gartner has really identified as being some of the key ones that are out there. So chat, SMS, conversational IVR, and chatbots. So on the first one with web chat, I think the main thing here is that web chat is going to be foundational. So this is a really good channel to consider, because it forms the basis for all the other text-based messaging that you might have. So going back to agent-assisted and all the channels that an agent can have, I grouped all of those text-based channels essentially in one box, and that's really what this is getting at. Is it's a good foundation that if you set up chat on the agent side, you'll be well positioned to support all those additional text chats in the future. It's also an important prerequisite for chatbots. So again, like I was saying before, with the self-service processes and making sure you've got manual processes to back that up, it'd be pretty hard if a chat transaction failed and you can't hand that off to an agent because they don't have a chat interface. And believe it or not, we've actually seen this happen. So you can't just assume that chatbots are going to run on their own. It's important to have a chat channel for your agents as well. So some of the things that we see with chat too is it's pretty well accepted. Customers accept it quite well. It's pretty widespread. It's also often looked for over voice. My wife for example, will definitely go to a website rather than call and queue and wait for an agent. I know that's anecdotal, but she's pretty vehement about that. And we see that with our customer base as well, that their clientele have this attitude. Also on the agent side, it does add some complexity to what agents have to do today if you're adding chat. And it also adds to their skill complexity if they have to do typing and talking and have those two sort of soft skills blended. That can be a bit of a challenge, as most of us already know. But that's just want to highlight that. But it is also a channel that does provide, along with web and being able to upload documents or pictures, a kind of a multimodal approach. It allows for higher chance of success with agents, in part because you can incorporate some of these other channels along with capabilities along with chat. From an IT perspective, we often see a silo where digital channels in particular, but chat among them, is separate from your voice platform. And so that does provide challenges for IT in a variety of ways, and also can provide agent and operational challenges as well. So reporting and those sorts of things can be a problem. So that's the web chat piece. So another channel to consider is SMS. SMS is a good first channel as well, like with web chat. It opens the door to some automation and multimodal capabilities, so agents being able to use SMS when they're on a phone call. I can text you a link to a document or that sort of thing, even while I'm talking to you. So that helps in the multimodal sort of sense. And SMS is definitely very well received and well known, so it's not much of a problem from a customer view or even from an agent view. And then also from an IT perspective, there isn't as much impact we find, as usually your contact center platform or even your CRM platform may have access to SMS. So you probably don't need to introduce a whole other platform. So it is a bit simpler, we find overall, compared to some other channels to implement and get the benefits of this. And then conversational IVR, this is a big one. This is where basically we apply bots to voice. So what we're seeing from a strategy perspective here is that a lot of new IVR investments is being focused here, so not with the traditional sort of speech reco model that we've seen, and also allowing some companies that have been stuck in sort of the DTMF world to start to consider using bots. So it's a good place to start with bots and to introduce those complex self-service capabilities and start to drive some real benefit on cost savings and improving the customer experience. We do feel that from a customer perspective that it's fairly well received. It's noticeable improvement from previous IVRs. In previous IVRs, we found customers kind of felt like they were in a bit of a box. And with conversational IVR, it's almost like they feel a bit freer and they start to open up a bit more. And I think this is also being helped a lot by some of the other voice bots that are out there. So being able to use Siri and Google Home and Alexa and that sort of thing. So those virtual personal assistants is really starting to change the culture a bit around the acceptance here, and that's going to have a positive effect. And with agents, there's really not much of a problem here. It sort of adds to what they typically are already doing today. They're pretty familiar with IVR, so that's not much of an issue. The big issue really comes from IT and the fact that having siloed systems can really be a problem for self-service. If you need to complete a transaction such as a sale, and that needs to go across multiple systems for purchasing or selecting and purchasing and shipping, then tying all that together into one single transaction is really where the crux of the challenge is for any kind of self-service. But as self-service gets deeper, it just highlights this siloed challenge even more. And it gets particularly Problematic as well on the contact center side if the bot platform is not tied into the contact center platform. So if you're trying to match or do journey analytics and see what's going on, if it's in a different siloed system than your contact center system, then you're going to run into challenges there. So part of the integration challenge really here becomes making sure that the bot technology is well tied into your contact center technology so that your operations and reports and things can work well. And even handing off from a bot to an agent if the bot process fails and having all that data flow through, it's pretty important to have those things well connected. And lastly, we have the chatbot piece, or virtual assistants. And the key thing here is that this is foundational for a self-service strategy. Again, going back to the breadth and the depth, that with the AI you can apply deeper or more complex transactions to self-service, and then you can apply that across the breadth of text-based channels. This is also where we see a lot of self-service capability and cost reduction. What's kind of funny with this one is that a lot of companies we find tend to come at it from a cost reduction initiative, but just like I kind of mentioned, I think before in some of the examples of just how you can use a bot and how much easier it is. Say trying to register a product, for example, and you take a picture of the serial number and send it in, text it in talking to a bot, and you compare that to a voice call, the experience is so much better that it does move the needle on customer experience as well. And so some companies have moved from a cost model to a customer experience focus for chatbots, and you just get the cost savings along with it. So it's a pretty big initiative and a pretty big strategy for companies to get into, but will pay off with significant value. So also with this, there's excellent reach for customers across all the different channels that are text-based, and that's increasing and improving as these applications change. So like Apple Business Chat and WhatsApp have created business versions of their applications so that organizations can provide service on them. So those are sort of key changes helping out the maturity here on channel and chatbot capability. But the other thing here that's probably the biggest impact is again on the IT side, like with the voice bot. The real challenge again is those siloed business systems, and that really complicates things. It's also a bit at the experimental stage. There's definitely benefits happening, but a common slogan is fail forward. So bite off something you can handle, experiment, learn from it, improve, and repeat, and kind of take that forward. So it's not something that's as mature as voice or other channels that you might be familiar with, like IVR. And then maybe lastly is on the agent experience side. I kind of skipped that one. So with chatbots, we think there's a fair bit of familiarity that's happening, but it's also complicating the lives of agents as they have to deal with new processes, for example. So handoffs from whatever chatbot transaction can be done through self-service. If that fails, then the agent needs to pick up smoothly from where the bot left off. And even some of the stuff we're starting to see too is that an agent might interject into the actual chatbot session without actually taking the whole session over. So that's another kind of complication for agents compared to what they're used to. Yeah, so that's it. Hopefully that provided some valuable things for you to be able to use as you proceed forward and trying to figure out your channels that you should consider adopting. That's it, David.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Great. Yeah, no, I can only imagine how many people are going to be downloading your slides given all the content you provided. So thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it. And there's always a good deal of conversation and perspectives around Omnichannel. What is it? How do I manage it? Where do I go from here? So again, great stuff. Let's go to the poll question. Looks like we're split. Again, which is the priority channel you're looking to adopt within the next year? For a while, chat was in the lead, and then chatbots, virtual assistants, and conversational IVR caught up. So it seems to be pretty split between the two, and SMS a ways behind. Messaging apps didn't even register. Is that what's your take on that, Noel?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Maybe it's a fact that there's a bunch of companies that need to implement chat first before they can get to the chatbot side. So you might be at an earlier stage of needing to introduce chat before you can get to the chatbots, and then those that pick the bot side, if it's say predominantly on chatbots, then you're maybe further along and you've actually got chat set up in your organization, and that is a logical next step to add that and to gain the benefits of that. So yeah, that's interesting. And I wonder whether then SMS is kind of low because people have kind of done that, or just not really worth the value compared to the other two, because definitely bots will provide more value.
Right. You covered a lot of ground. I made some notes while you were chatting, just for those of you who joined us later, and obviously you can circle back and observe the entire discussion that Noel has led us on today. But you started with currently the big four channels: phone, IVR, email, and chat. And then you said, according to Gartner, hang on to your hats, we're going to add 12 more, emerging channels, and giving us a 13 to 16 channel mix that we got to manage. The impact of this is that call volume is going down, but interactions are going up. So I love the term fail forward, by the way. That's brilliant. Let me lead off with this question. What are the key challenges that organizations face when adding channels?
Yeah, so I think the key challenge, I tried to address a little bit in those last couple of slides around VoiceBot and ChatBot, but there are really three different types of silos, I think, that are impacting companies' ability to move forward. One is the separation of within the contact center channels themselves. So if you've got, say, voice on one platform and digital channels on another, or even you can have digital channels across multiple platforms, that makes things really, really difficult at that channel level to manage and operate and figure out what's actually going on day to day, even in your contact center, and how well you're doing. Also, business units is another type of silo. So I touched on it very briefly, but if the process crosses from, say, marketing, sales, customer service, or even from customer service to back office teams or fulfillment teams, then you really need to look at how a transaction gets fulfilled across those business units, and they tend to operate in silos as well. So that's another pretty big challenge that organizations have. And then the last one is the actual business systems and actually data as well, where all the data is for your customers and what they're doing. And those business systems that, if they're not well connected together, then that can really be a problem. So we tend to emphasize that you probably want to keep it down to 1 to 2 contact center type technologies if you can in your organization, maybe between a contact center platform and a CRM platform. And then on the business system side, you might want to pick one that's your primary solution that you use. And then even if you connect up to others, then that becomes the integration challenge for IT to try and overcome. So hopefully that helps.
And it mirrors the feedback we got from the members. I'll talk about it a little bit more down the road here, but we did a little member feedback form, and when they got to technology constraints, the siloed apps and channels and data was the big issue. So no surprises there. Let's flip it over. What challenges do you think adding new channels will have on the agents?
Sorry, what impact will it have on agents?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Well, I think tried to touch on that a little bit as well, but yeah, a little bit more depth there. I think is agents are going to have a lot of shift in their kind of work, the type of work that they do across the types of channels and even going back to the silos, right? If all the technology is siloed and an agent spends too much time worrying about how to use the technology instead of the conversation that they're having with the customer, then that's really what you have to watch out for. And if you see that leaning towards the having to manage the technology, then that's definitely something that has to be addressed, and that is a challenge. If you can reduce it to those 1 to 2 kind of contact center technologies and a single sort of CRM and maybe a billing system, like try and narrow that down, you'll probably find that it'll be a lot easier on your agents. So I think that's really important to kind of shift them again to that one interface if we can. I think also just the more complicated processes as well, right? Like if things are being offloaded to automation again, just like what happened with IVR a little bit, offloading very simple calls. Now you're going to be able to offload fairly complicated interactions across different channels. So that leaves a lot of the complexity, and they're going to need good tools to support them. BEAs I mentioned, and being able to do multimodal, like hand off things to other technologies that can do things like payment processing or even deeper authentication. That'll help agents out so they don't have to do all that manual work.
Before I get to this next question, which is a little lengthy, and I'll read it, just real quickly, given the growth in self-service, do you see that reducing the agent count now, or increasing the agent count now? Where do you see the impact of self-service on the volume of agents that a typical contact center needs to have?
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting. I think Gartner has indicated that they feel there's going to be a reduction in the number of agents. So in the same period of 4 years, they are predicting that, I think it's North America-wide, there'd be a drop of about 1 million agent positions that would be required for this. I'm not sure that I buy it or really feel that that'd be that steep. I think, again, as the number of interactions grows, because things are going to be much more accessible and easier for customers, I think it's going to increase the overall volume. And right now, I'm kind of feeling like it might be maybe a bit of a wash. So some industries might be more impacted than others. I know banking, for example, is really, they're really trying to go after agent reduction, but we'll see where that goes.
Right. Yeah, it's going to depend on the vertical market. All right, let me read this next question to you, and bear with me. It's got 3 sentences in here. It says, our organization struggles to cope with our voice and email channels, and yet leadership wants to jump into omnichannel thinking it will solve our problems. I'm concerned about going to omnichannel when our existing channels deliver subpar performance. Will omnichannel help us, or do we need to take a step back first?
Well, I think without considering maybe what the industry is, I would consider going into at least adding chat and considering that, because I think with email, and you might want to evaluate this internally, is email really the right channel? It is considered a digital channel, but is it the right one? Are you really able to provide customer service? Are you able to measure customer service that you're delivering over email? And maybe really what's going on is the right channel for you might be a different one. And I'm suggesting chat because of the weight behind it, being a foundational digital channel for the future. It might be a good one to jump into. And the other thing might be just around if they're across 2 different platforms or not, voice or email. So I think if you've got that complexity, say it's on different, having email and voice on different platforms, then that could also be combining or compounding your issue. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear more about that one, but I'd say based on those 3 sentences, I would recommend moving to omnichannel and probably chat as the main channel.
Okay. This one reads, regarding agent-handled chats, I think we've heard this one before. What's a reasonable number of simultaneous chats that an agent can handle. And I guess that's going to be dependent upon the vertical market as well. What do you say?
Yeah, I think it's vertical market, but that's really reading into the complexity of the chat sessions and that sort of thing. I would start with a period of just having one chat interaction at a time, and just look at how your agents are handling that, and then maybe start to increase from there. But I think you'll also develop a good baseline of what a chat takes in terms of time if you do that. And some tools have a lot of difficulty. While they can provide multiple chat sessions all at once for an agent, the back end systems can run into issues like workforce management, for example, and others, and might have difficulty assessing the amount of time that's required per chat. So yeah, I'd start with one. I don't know if I had to just guess right now, I'd probably say no more than 3, but with a big "it depends" attached to that. And start with one and work your way up.
Yeah, we asked for questions and comments, and we're getting comments here, so I'll just share a couple. This one regarding the question we were just addressing. Within financial services, it is recommended 2 to 3 concurrent chats are the best practices. So thank you for that comment. And then regarding the last question about going forward or fixing channels going backwards, this viewer says, I recommend take a step back and review what is working and what is not working with your current channels. And I think you touched on that a bit. If you don't fix the immediate issues first, it's difficult and you can't really take on another channel. So again, different perspectives. We appreciate that. We encourage your questions and perspectives as we continue on down the road here.
If I can add to that, so that there you can take both perspectives. I sort of leaped over that one to saying if because of those 2 channels being more legacy channels, and this is the generalization I was making around email being a problem channel typically for a lot of organizations. We're seeing organizations wanting to move away from email, for example. So that's kind of where my comment was, well, if part of that problem around email is around, are you delivering good customer service on it, and can you look at, maybe that's the good thing to do, is to look at that and see if that's possible before you make the leap to a new technology like chat. So that comment is definitely valid to go back and have a look at what's not working now.
Right. Let me get into one that's kind of more vertical here. Any news on blending call center and dispatch channels with the field techs on a phone chat ACD router to accept or handle client support events as temporary agents? There's a lot in that question. I'm not sure I follow it. Does that make sense to you, Noel?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to depend on the type of field agent. So I think if it's like, say, banking and you want to reach out to branch, and extend that pool of resources, you could be successful in that. If it's more like field techs, like people that are out in the field dealing with the support issue, there's a variety of things that could come into play there. If it makes sense for the tech to talk back to part of the organization to develop support, then linking those two makes sense. But there are other looser links. So, for example, we have a customer who is in medical waste business. So they are considering actually right now an approach where their field team that goes and picks up the medical waste can report back. So either through a visual IVR or an app, and say if the bin is broken or have certain issues, they can just sort of click and initiate that. They don't have to rely on the customer to encounter that problem and relay it in. So it's to try and use those field resources as a bit of an extension of customer service. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, that's some of the stuff we've seen there.
Okay. This one reads, in my personal experience, on-hold messaging says for faster service, use our other digital channels. but I frequently find that the wait time is even longer than voice. How do organizations prepare for omni-channel and in particular staffing?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Some of what we've seen is how do you control when you offer those digital channels? And I would, if the length of time, wait time for say a live chat is quite long, then that should be reflected in the message. But I think what that commenter is getting at is that the messages are typically just pre-recorded and left as is. The other one I see a lot is the website, right? You know, for faster, better service. I'm a customer of TD Canada Trust, and I think that's their message, for example. Please visit our website. And that just, just frustrating when you're not even in a position to do that, and you're being told that you should go somewhere else. So, yeah, I don't really like those types of messages. I think some of that's going to die down as people become more familiar with other channels. I don't think we're going to have to specifically tell them to go to these other channels. That to me is a little bit like the hide the zero in the old IVR. In order to try and improve customer service, we're trying to steer them that way. And I think we should leave it up to the customers to choose.
Right. Good point. This is a little unusual question, but I'd like to ask it. Do you see an opportunity in the market for software development companies to offer integration support to clients due to the silo effect?
Oh, for integration companies to offer services to get past the silo aspect.
Yeah, I believe so.
Actually,
I believe so.
Yeah, I do. I think, actually ARIA is kind of doing that to some extent here, because a lot of our integration background has been gluing sort of heterogeneous technology together. So you could have, nice WFM and or Aspect or something with Genesis or Amazon or other platforms on your contact center side, and we've had to glue a lot of technology together there. But we're also seeing that there's a lot of movement to tying into the business systems and making it work as a more seamless solution for contact centers and for agents. So that's having to tie into all those different business systems. Yeah, so I think software firms might have a bit of an obstacle if they're not used to services and the specific solutions that individual companies might need. Software companies might be more trying to pool a lot of features into a single set product. So yeah, but branching out from there might be an option. Yeah, could be something to look at.
We got 5-6 minutes or so here. Let me see if I can get a couple more questions in. If you're pushing your customers to another channel, then be specific what channel you want the clients to use and ensure you have staff to support that channel in case something breaks. And if the customer becomes frustrated, expect them to call and want to speak to a representative or even escalate. Yeah, that's a great point, and I think you made it earlier. Have those manual backups and don't expect everything to be serviced by that channel.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things is if you're introducing a new channel and you don't have a backup for it. Yeah, I use the self-service as an example. Then yeah, even in Omni, that's important to be able to have that backup channel.
Yeah, let me read this. Again, I think it's referencing the support silo question. It reads, a key to success will be in categorization of support knowledge as a, quote, dual node method of managing integration knowledge rather than a single node product knowledge. I don't know that you need to add anything to that, but I did want to share it.
Yeah, no, I think that can make sense. Just sort of the categorization of what you're wanting to focus on. So I tried to talk a little bit about specialization. I think it's sort of maybe alluding back to to that. You want to group what you're working on and what you're offering, and even what you might offer across specific set of channels, and make sure you're encapsulating a whole area, say like billing or loans, and not leave anything out. Because if you do, then that causes problems.
This is a full one here. What percentage of contact centers are you seeing adopting AI or machine learning? Are there any specific industries where AI is being adopted in the contact centers? What is your recommendation on determining the next channel that contact centers should look at and plan for in the next fiscal year? I think we kind of chatted about that. Your two charts and examples are helpful in understanding what's available and emerging, but where would be my best bang for the buck if I plan to add a channel? So maybe you break that down in the AI and specific industries first.
Yeah, well, I think with AI, the AI is really, I'd call it it's something that's going to permeate all the different technologies in the contact center, right? It's going to permeate the self-service elements, the routing, reporting with predictive analytics, and then the ability to offer agents with things like best next action. So, and even workforce management and quality assurance is leveraging AI. So it's really kind of like electricity, right? It's really powering all of these things. So AI is permeating through the contact center in really all of those areas. Where it's most mature, though, is definitely in the self-service space with bots. And there's a lot of technology investment happening there, generally, not just specifically for contact centers, with the digital giants, right? Like Google and Amazon and Microsoft are investing very heavily in this space, to the point that it's really the next big fight, like iOS versus Android, is going to be over these virtual personal assistants, and also their ability to provide bot capability to organizations. So that's where I think the AI really is now. It's starting to emerge in routing a little bit. We're seeing that a little bit, not huge. And then at the agent level, we are seeing some attempts at doing best next action based on building up lots of data from your previous interactions to find trends and recommend next steps to agents. But we haven't really seen that adopted yet. Seen the technology for it, but not really in use today.
This is just a comment I want to get in before we wrap up regarding the organizations providing support. If a software organization is looking to providing this type of support, they need to justify and provide ROI to clients who want to purchase this type of support. I believe it was in terms of reference to the siloed support. So that's a good point as well. We're going to have to kind of pull it back from here. I do want to reference that we did a feedback form, as I said, and just there were 3 questions as it related to this subject matter, and the top technology constraints. The choice that was offered up most was, no surprise here, the majority responded siloed apps and channels and data, as I mentioned earlier. So that's pretty much where the conversation is right now with a lot of the CCNG members as well. So as we wrap up, a few reminders. You can join CCNG in the conversations that we've had today with Noel on LinkedIn. We encourage questions only. Posts and responses to those questions are pretty much what we limit it to now on our LinkedIn group. So please check that out. We rebooted it just recently to eliminate all the promotion. So that's what the feedback we got from you was. Also want to encourage you to share the webcast with your colleagues. Webcast link will be made available to you shortly via email, and that'll continue to add to new people to the conversation perspectives. We're growing this thing. We have over 12,000 viewings right now. We want to continue that growth. I referenced the 3-question feedback form. It's attached to this webinar, so please feel free to participate there. And note on the 4th question, it deals with upcoming webinars and topics, so please feel free to give us your comments there. Also, as I referenced, Noel's slides are attached. A lot of you have already downloaded them, I see. Please feel free to do so and share. CCNG has some upcoming member-hosted regional events. There's a link here that'll take you to all of them, but some of our members that are hosting us throughout Q3 and into Q4 include Coca-Cola, NetJets, Alcon, and Best Western. So again, check that link out or go to the website. We welcome your thoughts today. Feel free to share your perspectives using Twitter at CCNG Network, as well as at ARIA Solutions. So, Noel, I can't thank you enough for the time you've invested with us today. You are truly a wealth of knowledge, and you are so kind to share that information with us. Again, it's not preaching channels, it's how do I get there and what are the considerations. So, again, any last comments before we finish up here?
All right. Well, thanks very much, David. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's always fun, especially with the questions and seeing what people are experiencing. I love that part. So,
yeah, that's really the high takeaway. Well, thank you. And again, if we didn't get your question today, feel free to respond to the email. We'll make sure we get it to Noel, and we'll get your response. That's it, folks. Thanks for taking time with us today. Noel, thank you once again.
Yeah, thanks, David.